Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Today in Mañana. I'm Michael, happy to be joined by Nickolas. We were just talking a little fall weather. It's definitely a little cold these past few days, so as Alex would say, today, now's a good time to grab your hot cafe con leche, I would think.
Make it hot, yeah.
Hot cafe con leche, double shot espresso, get comfy and watch them Today Mañana. We got a great show lined up. We got two fantastic guests waiting. Their interview. We're going to have Mccraw-Leavitt and Kelly Johns, both fantastic local artists, neighbors of our own Nickolas.
Yeah, they're both neighbors. I have two abstract artist neighbors, one on each side.
Exactly, yeah. So
Like
hopefully they're providing some
amazing.
inspiration for him. I mean, you used to do a little painting or drawing.
Well, four.
Yeah, but you used to be good.
When I was
our mom is always upset whenever, because my brother Nicholas actually, like Alex and I were like probably the two worst artists. I used to, when I was in first grade.
Ever? No, I'm just kidding.
Potentially. I remember first grade, my first grade teacher was a big art person, right? So she'd make us do little arts and crafts, and every time she would always be upset, like, Michael, you didn't try. And I said, no, Mrs. Haragi, I tried. I'm not good. And finally, at the end of like the school year, she finally gave me back, because we used to get like little fake school money, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens is, when she thought you did something wrong, she said, you got to give me back some of your school money, right? Well, at the end of the school year, she gave it all back to me, the ones that she took, because she said, I'm sorry, because it's not your fault. You really did try. You were just really that bad. And I was like, that's what I've been telling you all year. I'm not good at arts and crafts. But Nick was like really good, and my mom's always upset because she's like, I should have pushed harder for him to go to art school, because he used to do some good stuff.
That's
we still saved your, art stuff, downstairs in the basement.
Hanging on the basement. I'm like,
exactly.
4-year-old
Your own gallery.
Yeah, I know.
His own gallery. We should start charging people to go,
look at
Nickolas Urpí 4 years old.
Yeah. Well, let's see, if I get big enough, then it'll be like, look what he did
Look what he did at 4, I know.
Yeah.
There's always that joke that parents always do that, where it's like you go to their house when they got little kids, it's like they have the framed paintings of their 3-year-old drawing this ugly drawing, and the people are like, oh, it's nice, and then people are like, it's like, why you got that drawing?
I don't know. My mother was like, do you want it? I was like, no.
Yeah, but Elizabeth probably wanted it. She's
no,
like, oh,
she didn't.
No, she probably does.
She didn't. I think she kept one thing because she thought it was amusing, but I'm like, I don't know. I'm waiting for the day when I can throw it out when she's not looking.
It's never too late to become an artist.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly, and you got two neighbors who are artists, so you got it right there. It's all right in front of you.
I think Michael's trying to push me to become an artist, but to quit the business. It's
like on the side. You never know. You could be the next Van Gogh.
I don't think so. I'll cut off my ear first.
Well, let me quickly do the sponsor list.
I was going to say,
don't forget. But we
right
are
in.
always happy to be presented by our sponsors, Emergent Financial Services, powered by Craddock Series Insurance, Matthias Realty, and Forward Adelante, the premier Latino networking business group here in Charlottesville. I don't know about you. Our guests are already right in, so let's just jump to it. Oh, Charlottesville Opera.
Which they have a duet series starting tomorrow, in case anyone's interested, at Friday at 7:30.
This coming Friday?
Yeah, tomorrow, Friday, yes. As in,
oh, yeah. It's
tomorrow, Friday.
It's Thursday, right?
It is Thursday. Every week we do it on Thursday. Tomorrow, Friday at 7:30 at the First Presbyterian. They're starting a duet series, and they're going to be doing them. Oh, I don't know how often they're doing it. I was going to say every month, but I know it's at least every month.
Have they announced what they're doing next year for
it
Opera?
is Bizet's Carmen. For the opera, and The Pirates of Penzance by Gilbert and Sullivan. It's going to be their first Gilbert and Sullivan, which is, I was surprised, but it turns out is the first Gilbert and Sullivan at the Charlottesville Opera since their starts 50 years ago or so. Yeah, it's the first one.
Carmen should be good, though, because Carmen's got that, that famous, what do you call it?
Habanera. It's a famous habanera.
Yeah.
I almost said habanero, and I'm like, no, that's a pepper.
Nobody would have known the difference.
Famous pepper from Carmen.
Famous pepper from Carmen, yes.
Well, let me quickly get to our guests where they can kind of join in. So we are happy to be joined by Mccraw-Leavitt and Kelly Johns, two local artists here in Crozet, Virginia. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
and
excited
excellent
to be
neighbors
here.
as well.
So, Leah, I'll start with you. So, tell us everyone a little bit about yourself and kind of how you kind of got into art.
Well, I actually got a fairly late start, which was what we were talking about briefly. But I was 48 when I first picked up a paintbrush, and it was after my sister passed away, and the world felt kind of gray and colorless. And I had been doing photography, but wanted to kind of push the boundaries of what I was doing with that. And I took an online class, and we just were playing. We were collaging and doing fun things. And I loved it so much. I've not stopped since then, and there's just so much art. There's just so much.
An
now.
online class, was it kind of like a master class thing, or sort of like
No, this was just a woman out in Portland. I was living in Germany at the time, so I had to download the lessons and then do them, and then we would post them on Flickr because there was no Instagram to share as a class. But she would have instructions. She's like, this week we're going to play with composition, and I want you to just get these kind of things together and try different things. And so it was very playful and low key. There was no, this is the right brush to use, or this is how to mix color. I started with the element of play and just exploration. And I think that was perfect for me because I struggled a lot with the perfectionism of everything. And so that is how I got my start, but I loved it so much I never stopped. And it didn't really take any training after that, but I do have an undergraduate degree in art history, so it's not like I don't know art. I just hadn't made art. So
that was going to be my follow-up question, because like we were talking about Rothko and Rodin in advance. I was like, did that come after? Did that come before?
So no, I studied that all 4 years in college, and then I did a big tour of Europe afterwards to go see all the art with a friend of mine, and then I lived overseas and got to continue to go to all the major museums throughout my adulthood. So a lot of exposure to looking at art, but I didn't start making it until I was 48. Wow. So yeah. So I've been doing that, about 12 years now, and it's my way of life. So
What about you, Kelly?
So I've always been an artist. I like to say where I'm at with my art career now is that my art was just waiting for me. Because I've always done art throughout my life, and the reflection I've always gotten from others is that you're an artist, so it's like I had to kind of develop into the person I am, I think, to hold the frequency of the art I make now. It's a much more deep, vast experience than I think I was ready to create at different stages in my life. So I always made art, but I didn't go after it as seriously and professionally, as I am now. And I did a lot more, experimented with different styles, line art, and different, more graphic. And my mom likes to say this is my mature art, which goes along with it.
So line art would be?
So line art is really where you take away everything, and you just have the simple shapes left.
Okay.
So I would do pen and ink, start with pencil, but you're taking a complex drawing of something and then working down to keep only the essential lines that represent what you're trying to portray. So, and I think I was sharing this with you, Nick, the other day, is that type of art was very interesting to me because I love providing a lot of white space in my art and time for whoever's interacting with it to have that space to feel into it, and those calm breaks in between the marks. So I was really drawn to line art always for that reason. But then I had my daughter, and I was in the phase of diapers and the naps and the monotony of that beautiful period of life. But it's very repetitive, and I just wanted to not. When I had a little chunk of time to do art, I was like, I don't want to sit down and be stressed about when I'm taking this line away. I just want to pour paint. I want to make big colors, and I always saw myself having this career of making these huge abstracts at it. It's like my second career because I used to be in the corporate world before I had my daughter, and so that's what I'm doing. But I do think that I had to arrive at this point in order to match the art that wanted to come through.
And so when you talk. And both of you, do you both kind of paint in more of an abstract style? Is that how you would say? How would you kind of categorize it? So what inspires you to kind of paint in the way that, I know before we would talk about colors, how do you kind of get inspiration from that to paint? Emotionally talking and...
Well, I like to say I'm telling a story with all of my paintings, and I don't start with the story in mind. I start by... Most of my canvases start by I will be working on something where I'm in the middle and I kind of know where I'm going. and I have extra paint on my brush, and I'll just reach over to a fresh canvas and I'll clean my brush off on the canvas. So most of my paintings start with random marks that I don't know, right? Like I just put it on there and then I start covering the canvas, and then something comes to me and I start to feel like there's an idea I want to express. But I mostly do very non-objective art. So you would look at it and you wouldn't be able to see anything you recognize. You know, abstracting is when you take something you know and then you start moving it away from being purely representational. And I do some of that. I do landscapes that way. But most of it's non-objective. Like Rothko is non-objective. There's just no thing that you can project onto it. So it becomes more about feelings. And so almost all of mine are about feeling good, right? Like I aim to make my paintings uplifting, and when people look at them, I always get, this is so happy, you know. I think adults forget that it's okay to just love color and feel happy, so I'm offering that to the world.
Judah shared some of your paintings live while we were talking.
So I'm curious, because before we were talking about, what was his name, Rothko?
Rothko.
And you were talking about how like he had a purple and that gave people kind of like a calming feeling. So when you kind of go into colors, do you kind of think about what colors you kind of want to put on the canvas, or are you just kind of sort of like whatever feels like in the moment to kind of...
I'm actually pretty intentional with my colors. I have a particular palette I like to work with, and what the intention comes from is how do I place them next to each other? Do I want a warm yellow with a cool purple? That's one kind of energy. Do I want a really strong orangey yellow with a very deep, strong purple? That's a different energy, because then you're like working opposites on the color wheel, and that's going to kind of create a clashing energy, which does that. So I work with the warmth and the coolness of the colors, and then I don't work with very many neutrals. If I do a neutral, it's going to be like one of my bluey greens that I like, that I'll take with a little bit of black and white and move it towards gray, but it's still going to have a lot of the color in it. But I just made the decision I didn't want to use what I call grown-up colors, like burnt umber. So I use the fun colors. So.
What about you, Kelly?
And so this is where our work is very in contrast, because I paint primarily in soft, neutral. I wouldn't say neutral, but I would say I gain a lot of my inspiration from the earth and the natural world, and the parts of the earth that are super inspiring to me are rocks and water and the sky and the natural color palettes that you see, and those pigments that you could actually make from the earth, which most paints have some of that in it, and with my work, my colors are also super intentional. I like to say artists are basically mad scientists, because, when you make colors, it's like you're making this magical compound of like taking that, the colors are going to have an energetic effect. Oops, I'm hitting the mic just like Nick said. So you're going to produce this feeling and this frequency. So when you're taking, like you guys were talking about purple, it has these natural components of ways it's going to make you feel. Well, when you're in there mixing and making your own colors, you're creating your own vibes. There's going to be a visceral response to your work that is known by your colors. So like I like my colors, my swatches that I, over the years I've made that I paint from I'm like, they're my DNA, you know? So they're sacred to me. So you'll see a lot of those repeated in my work, but it's very intentional and very thought out. Like I'll feel into a color palette for sometimes years before I actually paint it. And the work is, because I think my work, I like to explore like a state of being that's not. This is something I thought about, Lee, is that your work sometimes feels to me like more that exact present moment, and you're capturing that present moment, where my work feels a little bit like this state of being that you're exploring. You go through these periods of time in your life, you're going through this transition, or you're exploring this deep theme of learning this emotion, or this part of your life is bringing something out of you that you're exploring. And my work really kind of sits with those in-betweens and those times of learning those new states and just the experience of being human. And where I love that your work brings you right into the present moment, so I think that's a fun interplay.
Thank you for that. And if I can share a quote real quick.
Absolutely.
Something that I love, Joseph Campbell has a quote about art, and I'm not going to get it all right, but he talks about the moment of aesthetic arrest and how a painting should just stop you in your tracks and pull you right there into the present moment and hold you there for a moment and pull you away from all the chaos of your life and the thoughts in your head and just bring you right there. And that's what I try to do,
Yeah.
so thank you. And I want to say with Kelly's work, one thing I love, she'll go to the beach and then she'll just bring it home with her and put it into a painting, and you can feel the wind and you can the spray of the water and the way the sand feels. Like she has a way of capturing that and bringing it back with her. So you can have that with you at all times if you have Kelly's work.
Thanks.
So.
That's incredible. So you're kind of like, you're taking a lot of inspiration, I'm guessing, kind of from the natural world around you. And you're kind of more of just sort of like trying to capture a moment in like a present part of time.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. Nick, did you have a question?
No,
Because I see you thinking over there.
No, I am thinking because it's interesting because I have the benefit of, as Kelly and Lee were talking, I could see Judah putting up the painting, so I could see what they were trying to describe. But that is a great point. Is that first off, I was thinking because that quote from Joseph Campbell reminds me a lot of Schopenhauer when he talked about that's the purpose of art was to you escape the suffering of the world in an instant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Love
that. That's, and obviously he went down further into this great philosophy it is, but it's interesting because I can as you were both talking about it, I can see how Lee's does that. Are you still, Kelly, trying to achieve that the escape, or is it because it is a calmer, much longer process to look at your painting than it is at Lee's?
I think the thing that my art, I really try to bring through with my art is the experience of being human on the planet. So it's like, when you spend time in nature, it provides such a reflective experience. Like, you're sitting beside a river and it's flowing and you're thinking, you can get quiet and think about, well, how can I be like this river? Like, where am I throwing rocks in my life and blocking up the dam? Like, shouldn't things just flow more naturally? And it's just such a reflective experience. So I love to mimic those. I do a lot of pouring paint, so it's like the water is flowing. I gain a lot of inspiration and guidance just from the way the water makes the shape on its own. So I think with my art, there's a quote, and I don't know who said it, but if we're going quotes, it's about how artists tell with their art the things that people can't explain or say. And I think, we go there, and my art, while it looks very calming, it has a depth to it. Like this series that I'm sharing, today that I'm about to release. It's about a time in my life that I had to rebuild everything. And after a season of grief, get into who I am and what that means for me now, and what's the raw material that I have to work with, and what do I want to make of that? That's not a light concept, but how can I make that into the most beautiful thing? Because it is beautiful. It's an opportunity that not everyone has. And if I can only reframe it to see the opportunity that's before me, it's amazing. And so with my art, I don't know if it's so much about stopping you in your tracks. Well, I hope it does that. It's more about how does it inspire your life? And my main goal with my art is that I hope that if it's on your walls, it's bringing you peace, and it's reminding you of that connective thread to yourself, that you have the ability to reach in and sit quietly and feel yourself and that guidance. And, I just want it to be that when you look at it, it inspires you to constantly go back there to yourself, because that's the place that I'm going when the inspiration comes through for how the paint pours, how the colors blend, what sand I throw in, or what nature scene. It's it's these big concepts that I want to sit with you over time. So I guess it's a little bit different. Maybe a little bit
I was going
different.
to say, so when you say throw the sand in, there's physical sand in the painting as well? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I work in mixed media, and so does Lee. But,
I didn't know that. I was going to say, was that another contrast? But could we get into that just a little bit before we move on?
Yeah, so I primarily work with watered down acrylics. So I'll take a different, there's all different types of paints, but and we're always exploring new art supplies. So it's but I like to take the different, there's fluid acrylics, which flow much more naturally. They're a lot thinner, and then heavy bodied acrylics. So I like to get a different, that dichotomy of thin layers mixed with throwing big chunks of paint in, and then using watercolor pencils or crowns or oil sticks, graphite pencils, basically anything. Sometimes I use drywall mud and put more texture. But then what I really love to do is if I can have an element of the earth that's from that scene that I'm drawing all that inspiration from, or that color palette, which is often sand. So it's sand from different beaches. And, sometimes when I do commissions, I'll ask people, do you have any place that this is special to you that you want some soil from, or little pieces of rocks? Sometimes I've used crushed up glass, tiny pieces crystal glass that you buy at Michael's, not shards of that can hurt you.
Beer bottles.
But
broken beer bottles.
This is right next door.
Yeah.
I got my wine bottles.
But I wouldn't put it past, because it's all of those layers create something really interesting, and that again goes back to how I think about art, is the layers and the processes and everything. So, whether I wouldn't be surprised if a tree branch shows up in there, or just I love putting different interesting things in.
What about you, Leah?
So I work with what we like to call fodder. So it might be an old painting that I cut up. It might be, I like to do a lot of mono printing, where you have a jelly plate and then you put a thin layer of paint and you might put shapes on it and then lift it up. And I'll use deli paper to do that. And I'll do it 2 or 3 times. And then it starts to create unintentional things that come together and become interesting. And so I have buckets for just my papers like that. I also will press paper onto something to pick paint up, and that starts to create patterns on the other piece. That might become fodder. And then I take, canvas. Sometimes I'll take the unstretched raw canvas, and I will paint a wild design all over it just to cut it up and use it. And I like to layer all of that on there, and I may have canvas applied to canvas, and then the mono printing on there, and then all of the things that Kelly's talking about. I use the Neo crayon. I even use some oil on top of it. It has to be the last layer, but I'll use the RF pigment sticks because they're so saturated in color. And I don't have any rules about how I do it. My show is called Unruly. I literally want to operate without any kind of constraints, but if I can add in real quick, the constraints I do work from, I have 3 things that I focus on. I want my paintings to have a strong composition, because it will distract you as a viewer if there's something off on the composition. So even though it might look like a lot just happening on there, I'm actually very careful at the end to put in the balance of how it's composed, and the big and small. And then I work with contrast, so I don't have all my colors in the middle of tonality. I like to have some extremes in there, so that again your eye is moving around and is not you're not missing that contrast, because life is all about the contrast, right? And then the last thing I do is so I have color, contrast, and composition. So the third piece is the color, and I have to look at how I'm balancing the color in a painting. So I'm not going to have one splotch of yellow and never pick it up again. But those are my only rules. Everything else is anything goes, and it's whatever I need that I have available to me to tell the story that is evolving. And it's a conversation until the very end, at which I get the final say.
Wait, so have you ever, I was going to say, though, have you ever broken the rule where you can only use a color once?
I probably do have paintings where that's happened, but for the most part, I might take a color that I've mixed. I like to mix a lot of my colors. Most of them are mixed instead of straight out of the tube, but I might take that, and then I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it, and it moves towards the green. And then I will take that same core mix, and then I'm going to add a little bit of the red to it, and it moves the other direction gets cooler, or I might tint with black and white on that. So that one color may only show up one time in the original mix that I made, but it's mixed with other things through there, and that creates a cohesiveness in my paintings that is subtle. So you're not going to necessarily look at it and go, "Oh, I know how she did that," right? But
your eye perceives it.
Yes, it's like almost like the way we use underpainting. So I do use underpainting. So my whole canvas gets one color before I start for pieces that I'm going to work on in that particular way. Sometimes I start with a white canvas and wipe my brush off, but that's one way to bring cohesiveness, but another way is how you use your colors. So since I want to use a lot of colors, they get mixed with each other, and that is not necessarily apparent to your eye right away, but it gives that feeling of bringing it all together. And that's sort of how I've matured as an artist, is learning how to do that and bringing that into my work.
Well, I was going to ask, because when I was talking with Kelly about her art beforehand, but when we decided to do the whole thing for the show, one of the things she mentioned is working on the composition beforehand, right? The structure. I think we discussed that, right?
She does these beautiful sketches that could be art by themselves.
I know my brother is always like, "Why don't you frame those? Those are the best part." They're like,
yeah, they're really
the
neat.
ideas.
I was going to say, like, there was an
And they're
exhibition
messy.
in Willie and Mary about the sketches from Da Vinci and Michelangelo that we went to, and like those are like, you're like, wow, it's same thing. It's like those are art in themselves. But I'm just curious because hearing you talk about the end composition, making sure the structure is sound, sounds like a post like process.
Yeah.
Is that accurate, or is there still something in the back of your mind going beforehand? Like, I don't want to use this side of the like. Again, don't know how that abstract comes out. Like, I don't want to use that side of the canvas because I want to make sure it's balanced.
One of the paintings I gave you for this slideshow I started out with a little bit of intentionality. I thought I would really like to explore using these large floral element because people relate to that. Right. And I thought, well, let me see if I can do something. I fought and fought and fought with it, and I could not pull it together the way I wanted because I started with too much of an idea. And what I ended up doing was rotating a quarter turn and then just and painting over the whole flower. And it's turned out to be one of my favorite recent paintings. But I had to have the conversation with the canvas. So that's how I work. It's always a back and forth. And sometimes when I get stuck, I just like grab a color and just go, and I just randomly throw something on there to give me a new start point to solve from. So for me, it's a big puzzle, and it's like, how do I get the color composition and contrast all in balance with each other? And when I get too precious and I hold on to one section that I love, I sometimes lose my ability to quote unquote solve the painting. So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Funny that you mentioned that because my next question was kind of going to be, what are some challenges you face as artists? Like, is there something kind of like painting block? You know, like writers may have writing block.
Yeah.
Is it like a painting block? Or are you sometimes kind of like, I cannot find inspiration anywhere? Kind of like, what are those challenges and how do you deal with them?
Do you want to start? Or?
Oh, sure. Yeah. For me, it's never a lack of inspiration. I have sketchbooks full of ideas for series and things that just sit on my heart. More time is, I have a 5-year-old, so, time and to be in the studio is always a challenge. But I would say a challenge is, always as an artist is to be able to reveal your soul. I mean, when you make art, you're putting your soul out for the world to see. And that took me a long time to be okay with just, putting out really what I really wanted to put out. So you kind of always have to push that boundary and, be the artist that you want to be, whether, if you don't want to do some cheesy social media trend, don't do it. If you want to make paintings about
don't do it.
things that, are a little bit cutting edge or theme, have messages that might rattle people. You got to do it. There's things where you have to constantly be evolving and making sure that your art is a true representation of you and what your voice in the world and not conforming to what society wants from you or, so that's like a constant check-in.
I'm clapping for Kelly. That was good.
I think the other thing for me, where we were just kind of talking about your process, mine is very different. It's so premeditated. Yes. It's like going back to what I was saying about the line art. Like once I get to the canvas, I am pouring paint. I am free, but there it is so intentional before I get there. You know, I plan out all my colors. I make my colors. I do these composition sketches. I have a theme of what I'm exploring. And then once I get there, it's very free flowing. But I do feel that a challenge is always getting that, you know, you have these big ideas as an artist and they're always a little bit different than the last work you made, you know, and then, so it's like, how do you make it look like what's on your heart and what's in your mind? Like that, there's always that energetic side and then bringing it into the 3D world. And that takes just making bad work.
Yeah.
And that's hard, especially when you know, have any accomplishments you've made as an artist. You're like, okay, well, I sell paintings for $4,000, $10,000. And then you're like, this work is terrible.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like going back to those points. But if you want to evolve and stay true to your artistic expression, it's like you have to be willing to make that bad work and explore those growths that you're trying to evolve into. That took me a while because I was stuck in this perfectionism box. Like, well, if I'm not making art that looks like I know I'm capable of, it's not worth making. Well, that's the secret sauce, in my opinion. So just pushing yourself through this really gritty, uncomfortable
You have to push through the self-doubt.
Yeah, and stay with it.
Yeah. No, that reminds me, because I used to kind of make as much better at writing music than I do, but I used to ever do it. But every once in a while, it's like you have to deal with this moment where it's like in your head, you kind of think you have this song, you're like, oh, this is the next Star Wars. Like, I can't wait to try that. And then you put it in the computer, and then it sounds terrible. You're like, no, I don't get it. It sounded so good in my head, and now it sounds terrible. Exactly. You just kind of got to push through. So that's good. Would you have any kind of words, because kind of coming off that, words of inspiration for people who kind of like maybe like, oh, maybe I'm getting into art, you know, maybe Judah or Jerry's looking saying they're gonna go home and try to start picking up some paints, you know. What words of wisdom could you provide for people, I think?
So I also work with sketchbooks, but I always encourage people to go buy. I like to work with the Canson watercolor sketchbooks, and the paper's very sturdy. And I'm like, see if you can fill the whole thing with the bad art. Like literally make this your bad art sketchbook, because then you're free to try everything. And I filled probably close to 30 of them by now, and that's usually how I warm up. And if I don't have enough time, I'll only do something in my sketchbook because I want to stay loose. But again, leftover paint goes in there, and then I'll look through my scrap thing and put something on there that completely doesn't go with the color that I already have on there. And then I'm like, what do I do with this, right? Like, it's the play and the having a space for it to literally not look like what is in your head is, I think, the best way to like get started, because so many people stop when the flower doesn't look like the flower. And here I am 12 years later, and the flower did not look like the flower. So, you know, but you when you learn that that's okay and you can pivot and you can keep going, it wound up being one of my favorite paintings, but not because the flower came out the way it was supposed to. It's because I allowed that conversation to happen. And you learn how to have the conversation by playing and doing a lot of sketches. And I share my sketchbooks. When they're full, I call it Flippin' Friday. And I'll just do a thing and I'll flip through. And I want people to see just how much bad art I made on my journey to get to the paintings that I'm sharing on Instagram. So I like to share that. And,
but does the bad art ever like germinate even from it, where you're just like reflipping through something that's like bad and you're like, oh, actually that could be good? Okay.
Well, a lot of times I'll be like, I like that element, or I love how those two things work together, and then I pick that up and I bring it into something I'm doing on like paper or canvas that would become a painting. It's a great place to learn, but a lot of my art is about happenstance and what just, you know, these wonderful coincidences or serendipity, right? Like, that's a favorite word in the artist world, because that's what we love. We're like, oh, who knew, right? Yeah. And then you see that and you're like, how can I use that? How can I bring that into a bigger, you know, scale and work with it? But you cannot find serendipity if you're being super intentional all the time, or if you stop the first time something looks terrible. Yeah. So setting a goal of just like filling a sketchbook with just whatever, right? And being okay with that, because like you said, you often will go back through, like I'll look through mine years later and go, oh, I really like that now, but at the time I'm like,
Or you can see what it can become versus what it was at the time.
Yeah. And I've actually sold out of my sketchbooks because I post them. I post the individual pages if I like it. And people will say, can I get that? And I'm like, yeah, let me get the little purse off here, So
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you have a show currently, Lee.
I do, yes.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because one of the things also that we just discussed, even just briefly here, was the fact that, like, Kelly has series, sometimes or all the time?
It depends. I usually have work on my website that's available, or I have some hung locally in Crozet that you could go in and buy a painting off the wall, which would be awesome. Go for it.
Go do that.
Yeah. And but then I like to paint in a series and formulate new bodies of work. And those just come as they come, because, I would love to be able to say I do for a year, but they really kind of have to go with the timing of when the art, what's going on in my life, but also when the art needs to be made. It just, it comes in, and then sometimes it happens quickly. And then like this series that I shared with you, that's been an evolution of over 2 years. I've been making other art alongside of it, but this series, the idea for the series started 2 years ago, and then I incrementally worked on it. And then next thing I know, I'm like, it needs to be finished, and now it's finished, so it kind of has its own life. But I like to work in bodies of work, so I pretty regularly have one going on, and then also have, other work that I've already made.
And they're cohesive, so if you have multiple pieces, they hang well together. That doesn't always happen with my art.
I was going to say that. I was going to have that lead in, because I was going to say you don't necessarily work in series as much, but yet at the same time you have a show.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of currently. Can you tell us more about that? Where it is?
So
how people can see your art.
Down in Lynchburg at the Academy of the Arts, they have a beautiful gallery donated by an artist, Patricia Harrington. She's since passed away, but was a contemporary of my mom, who was also an artist. And it's a beautiful gallery space. And I am hanging in what's called the front gallery, the up front gallery. And it's got high, kind of like in the studio, which none of you can see, but very high ceilings and white walls and the wood floors. And I have 32 pieces hanging there right now. The majority of them are very large. The only sort of cohesiveness that I said would be part of it is I worked in increments of like 4 foot height. So they're all 4 foot tall. And so that brings a little bit of like cohesiveness, but then it's just all these different styles and types of paintings that again reflect the color composition and contrast. But I have a color signature that is so clear, even when you see my different styles, people are like, that's Lee. Yeah. And so it's really fun show, and I created something special for it. I guess you would call it almost a series, but I did 14 small paintings, because everything else is enormous, and not everybody has room for that. But these 14 small pieces, all very different looking from each other, but the naming of them, I named them all affirmations. So when you look at it and you think of the name of the painting title, it's an affirmation to you. And my favorite one is kind of a pun, because I have this gorgeous sort of orangey background, and I ended up thinking, this needs a cactus. So I cut out a cactus out of one of my green scraps that I had. And the title of this one is "You Look So Hot." So
That's cute.
And someone actually has already purchased the one that I had cut out letters from a different project, and I had the U and the R, and I have the R is like facing backwards, and it's before the U in the way it looks. But I named that one "You Are Amazing," and someone's already taken that one home, and every time they look at it, it's like they're going to hear that reflected back to them. So that's the closest I've gotten to like a series, but.
Well, that's interesting, though. It's interesting the differences, but then how you were able to do it.
Yeah.
Still in a different way.
Yeah, and each of the pieces look very different from each other, but the naming, like the choice to name everything as an affirmation makes it into kind of a series. So, and those can all mix and match and hang together. Right. So.
And if people were interested in looking at these pictures online or potentially purchasing them online, where would they go?
So the Academy has an online shop called Artistica. Okay. And you can go there and see my whole show is posted on there with it's a shopping cart basically. So even if you can't make it down there, you can absolutely go and check out and see all the affirmations and see the larger pieces. And they are available through the Academy. So,
and do you have a website too, Lee, for all your?
I do. Okay. Yes. I think I sent that information. I don't know if that gets in the show notes, but my website does have a way to contact me. It doesn't stay fully up to date because I have a lot of art going on. I'm also in Crozet year-round in a shop called Bluebird. I have over 50 pieces there. So.
And you live almost right next door to Nick, so you could just...
Absolutely, yes.
Being in Crozet is convenient.
Yes. It's really great to live out there. So I'm out there. I'm on my website. I'm in Bluebird. I'm in the Artistica shop while my show is up. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
And what about you, Kelly?
My art is under a business name that I call my studio, basically Terra Ethos. Okay. So my website, you'll see on the show notes as well, is under that name, Terra Ethos. And then, there's always work live there, but yes, need to make sure it's updated because pieces are out. Yeah. And
so people can look at your works on Terra Ethos and also purchase.
Yes, and then I'm always available. Like, if you send me a message or an email, I primarily show my work on Instagram. I have some pieces in a shop in Crozet that's called Reset. It's a sauna and athletic recovery, I think is what they call the store, which goes really well with my art.
They have infrared saunas, which is fabulous. So just go try that.
And they have cold plunges. It's a lovely little shop. So I have paintings for sale in there. And then I focus a lot of my work on commissions. So I will be opening my commission calendar for 2025 up soon. And then Lee and I are both doing a market soon.
Oh, that's right. Thank you for remembering. Yeah, it's a great market.
Yeah, it's the Bluebird Holiday Market, which will be on December 7th. So we'll have a lot of different price point art available, good holiday gifts. And so, those are some of the ways you can find me.
And where's the Bluebird Market?
So I'm glad you gave me a chance because it's really fun. So I used to live in Germany and go to the Christmas markets there. And you wandered through, like I used to go to the one in Nuremberg, and you could wander through the city and all the different little vendors were set up. And it was just such a fun experience. And this Crozet market feels a lot like that Bluebird puts on because artists are housed in local businesses. So it's not like you go to one big hall and how that crazy that gets. No, this is walking through the town and going to you get a little map and you go to it'll tell you which artists are at which locations. Oh, interesting. And so you park and then you walk all over the downtown area and then you kind of have to drive down to Star Hill, but Star Hill will also have quite a few artists. So it's a really great experience, and it's a fun way to do your Christmas shopping. So
exactly.
I think there's going to be over 65 vendors there this year. So
and that's December 7th?
December 7th.
The
on
day
the
after
Saturday.
Feast of St. Nicholas.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
That's not very important.
We put our boots out for that.
I was going to say, we do have an audience question from Kevin Higgins. Thank you, Kevin Higgins. He asked, how do you two, both of you, know when you are done with a piece of your art? When do you decide to put your brush down?
Oh, talking about
question.
Artist challenges. Do you want to?
I'll hop in. So I often will let it rest, and I put it up on my space that I have for it, and I try to look at it from a lot of different ways. Sometimes Nick's probably seen me doing this. I take it out in my front yard and lean it against the bushes, and then I go across so I can see it from further away because my studio is not big enough to get far away from a larger piece. I will come down the stairs at night and lean over the railing and look into my studio and try to look at it from different angles. But I mostly know by a feeling, and it won't feel complete. I have one piece that it just wasn't quite done, and I couldn't figure out what it was for the longest time. And then all of a sudden, I was sitting upstairs eating, and I was like, oh, it needs a little piece of pink at the top. And I went down and I painted it right away, and then it was like done. So there is no like, yes, this is done. No, this isn't. It's if I feel like it's done, I stop, and if it doesn't feel done, I just keep going. So
yeah, and I will have to second that. And that's where art is so, it's so subjective, but I think with abstract art, it's easy to look at a piece and say, well, they just kind of flung paint on there. Like my kid could do that. Well, yes, your kid could do that because, that's really when you're uninhibited as an artist. So your 4-year art, Nick, was probably very good,
I still don't think so,
but it's, that is one of the hardest things is to know when it's done. And it really is. Sometimes I live with my art, I'll hang it on the wall and just be around it for a while. And I'm like, is this piece done or does it, because the second you overdo your piece, to me, it feels ruined. So it's like this very delicate balance. Yeah. Like you're working on it. And then there's like, okay, I think it needs one more mark here, but I'm not sure. And then you have to just wait a minute sometimes and then go for it, but that last mark is like the highest risk one.
And because you use a lot of white space in your art, you can go too far.
I've repainted canvases. Well, I can't actually repaint canvases because you leave a lot of raw space, but repurpose them or restretch them for something else because I am like that. I covered too much area. It doesn't feel like me. But yeah, so it's. That is where also it just comes down to practicing. Like you just get better at showing up and knowing that what's gonna come through, you're gonna be able to handle it and direct it and be there for the instruction that you're receiving. It's to me, it almost feels like you're downloading it. And then you're in the moment, which sometimes I have a hard time with, like videoing my art process for Instagram or whatever because I'm like disruptive. It's so disruptive. I don't know how. Takes you out
of the moment.
Yeah, it takes me, and it's like you're so in the moment to receive what you need, how you need to move your brush, turn your brush, a flick of a paint, a turn of a canvas, like if so it's that presence that and just being able to hear and. Be available for and then the confidence as an artist that you gain over time to be like, yep, if I do that mark, I know it's done. Like if I add one more thing, I'm overdoing it. I have to stop now. So I think it's a combination of feeling and confidence
and just like a knowingness, like you know your art, and so when it's where it's supposed to be, but you have to like allow space for that knowingness to come through. In my case, gesso is my friend because I do cover my whole canvas. I had a piece that I was trying to make for the show because it was a certain size that I wanted it to be. I had 4 pieces that were like long and narrow, and the 4th one just wouldn't come together. And in the 2 days before I had to take my U-Haul down to Lynchburg, I repainted it 3 times.
Wow.
Yes. I just was like, it's not right. Nope, it's not right. And I just gessoed, let it dry, and then put the paint on there, and then started over. And the 3rd time, I was happy with it because I wanted it to go with the other 3. So I'm fortunate in that I can just like, it's not working, cover that up, So
I think for me on that front, I just accept that, like if I made a mark that I'm like, that was a good idea. I only 90% love how it turned out. I gained the knowledge for the next painting of like, okay, well, I would have stopped that. I would have done 70% of that instead of, like a bigger, so it's that I'm just stockpiling that data. Yeah. And then that's really where art is about technique. So, when you use like, how did they do that? Well, it probably took them a lot of years and trial and error. And then to make this simple paint swatch. The more simple things are, it's like the more complex
and the more experience.
So it's that it's that journey.
It reminds me. This is probably a terrible analogy, but like when you're cooking and you have that last thing of salt, if you put that last spoon of salt, it could be too much salty, and then you can't fix it.
Right.
It's like, but it still needs a little salt. How much do I put?
Or Old Bay. I'm from Maryland, so we use Old Bay. I don't know if you guys know what that is.
Yes.
But if you go too much, it's done.
Yeah.
It's just over.
Well, you see, that's what I was saying. That's why I stick to fiction instead of painting, is because you can always delete.
Yeah.
But you can't get rid of something.
Writing and music today, especially. Yeah, it's like, that was one note too many. Delete.
Cut it.
Yes.
Yeah, you can go back and cut it out, but it's a lot harder with canvas, and it's like even sculpture, it's the same thing. Like you cut out too much of the marble, you're like,
Yes.
that leg's coming off.
Yeah. So I want to circle that back to an earlier question about, how do you get started? Maybe you pick something that you can paint over or cover up or delete, so that the perfectionism that's so like overbearing in the beginning is easily addressed, right? Yeah.
Oh, and I guess I never really added my thoughts to that question. I think a lot of the best art comes out of challenges. So like you're saying with your art, and like you're feeling like it was so bad, I'm not good at art. Well, you're quite likely really good at art. It's just that
you haven't seen my butterfly.
But here's the thing: those types of art, if you stayed with it, are forcing you into a different avenue of expression. So whether you picked up some, I don't know, clay and smashed it onto a piece of paper and then had some it's not, maybe what's trying to come through isn't in a traditional format that you were struggling with, but it's in those challenges that the best art is made, and that everyone has their unique expression, and that's what makes this world so beautiful, is that we're all different, so it's in those where you're like pushing against. I think that if you can look at those as opportunities, and then also the other thing is just take note of what lights you up. You walk through a city and you're like, I just can't get over how the architecture of those balconies. Well, that is calling out to you, so maybe try sketching those and try different methods until something sticks. And it's that exploration that of things that excite you, that you'll come up with a style that's unique, and in combination with those challenges of things that aren't working that push you away from those and into exploring other things, and that combination of your relationship with the things that inspire you and then the things that you find that work well for you.
Yeah.
So it's a very personalized journey, and you just have to be willing to stick it out, Yeah.
I like to say that when we make art, I see something, and then it passes through my brain of how I think about it, and then it moves through like my heart, what I love about it, and then my gut, what I feel about it, and then it comes out through my hands at my current skill level.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, that's
good. That's, I think, how art works. And so when you start making art, if you think about it that way, it's like, oh, I literally can't do it wrong, because these things are all mine, right? The way I see it, the way I feel about it. And my current skill level, I also own that. And that's the piece you have to work on, right? Like if you want a higher skill level, you practice, right? But knowing that when you're making art, you're sharing with us how you see the world.
Beautifully stated, both of you. It makes me almost want to.
This close.
Almost, just as close. I mean, the only thing I didn't say about was I'm also very impatient. So the process of painting takes a long time. And then
that's what I mean. It doesn't have to. You could be a quick sketcher, and that's your style. So that's what I'm saying. You have to lean into what works for you, and don't try to force yourself into the things that you don't like. There's so many ways to make art. The other thing, this is the last thing I thought of that I'll add, is presentation is everything. So, you do a little sketch. Well, half of art is how you present it. So, put it in a mat, put it in a cool frame. That's the other half. So don't stop but with, thinking like, okay, well, this one sketch doesn't look exactly how I want it to. Well, how would you hang it on the wall? What would you put it next to? Like, that's just as important. Yeah. And that also informs your style of art going forward, because you're like, okay, well, I love concrete, so I'm going to make a concrete frame. That's out there, but I always think about concrete because I love rocks. And so then your sketch itself could be very simple. It could be a quick little graphite thing, but it looks stunning in this concrete frame. And then there's that interplay between how you present it. So frame it up. Don't give
that's
up.
A great point, because even like we look at all the old masters, and it's always like they've taken a photo of it out of context, and then you go see it in person, and you're like, man, that's like part of the ceiling, and it's great, but like he designed it for that specific purpose, or like the Last Supper. I always remember because we walked in the dining hall of the monks, and you walk in, and then you turn and you see it, and the present. It's just so much more overwhelming when you see it in person, because it's like he designed it for that space, like he was doing like. Da Vinci was doing
the perspective.
I think it was like drawing, like he put like ropes across the entire hall, so that the nail goes straight into Jesus' left eye, so that like if you're standing dead center, it's like absolutely. So like we forget that like there's the presentation is important, because how you see the work matters. Like it's designed for a certain space.
And that's a good example, because he also was designing it for you as the viewer to feel like you were in the scene, right? Like you were participating in part. Yeah, and it was designed that way. So when you see it 2D up, on a projector, because I studied art history long time ago, and the Venus of Willendorf was the same size as the Last Supper when it was being shown on the projector, right? And then when I traveled afterwards to go see all of the art, it was so different in context and with the scale and with the frames and how it was presented. It is a very different experience. And so that's my plug to encourage all of you to go see art in person, because really that's the artist talking to you.
I was going to say, like, everything art-wise in person is better. And you can just keep going down the line, like going to a concert in person, go to a, every medium is better in person than it is just trying to digitally, like experience it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Kelly, Lee, thank you both so much for coming on today. It was wonderful to have you both here.
Thank you for having us.
This was
really
delightful.
Fun. Yeah.
And I also enjoyed the brotherly interplay.
Yeah, totally.
This is us on our friendly days,
Yes.
I was going to say.
Repartee.
We're not seeing you at the tennis match. Right?
Exactly. We control ourselves when we're on camera,
Yeah.
I guess,
We do our best.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate to have Kelly to talk with all the time. So I encourage all of you out there to also find people to talk about art with.
Try a neighbor.
Yes, go to the galleries and talk to the people with you about what you're seeing, and find out how the two of you are seeing it very differently. It's so fun, and that's what art is for.
Yeah, actually, a quick question that just popped in my head. How do you deal with potential criticism sometimes as artists?
Ooh,
yeah.
that's a good one.
We were signing out. Not
I
like
know.
Hardest
But it just
question of the day. At the end, let's throw it in. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'll start. I think that's why you just have to be true to yourself. You can't make art for someone else. I think that is a Rick Rubin quote. Not quote. I don't think that's how he said it exactly, but it's
the essence of his book.
Yeah, if you're making art that is your sole expression, it's almost not a choice. It's like we have to do this. So as long as you're staying true to that, you can handle the criticism, because you were bringing something into the world that you had to do.
Yeah.
And that in itself is worthy of the journey, and the experience of doing that is so fulfilling. And what it brings to you as a person is just as valuable as selling it and being able to live off of it and seeing it in people's homes. It's like that's the byproduct,
The icing on the cake.
Yeah, but the fact that you were able to bring that out and be there for it and show up and master these crafts and these skills and connect to yourself. I mean, you've already achieved such a feat. And so I think if you're really doing that, then if someone doesn't like it, they have that right. There's so much art. The same people don't find, everyone finds beauty in different things, and that's lovely, so people that are going to connect to your art are going to feel it and connect to it, and it's for them. And if it's not, there are a bazillion artists and art that is for them, and that's lovely.
Yeah. And it's that perspective that there's 8 billion people on the planet. Not all of them like you as a person. Not all of them are going to like your art. It's just loving what you do. And I went through a long stretch where I just had to make art where nobody liked it. I learned to love to do it for myself because I was kind of in a bubble, but the people closest to me did not like the art I was making. And I had to make a choice early on. Am I going to do this because I love making it, or am I doing it for other people's approval? Right. And I think when you get over that hump in your art, and then it's almost like, well, now I'm saying I like myself, right?
Yeah.
And that's different than worrying about whether your art is liked by everybody. It's like, I like myself and I like what I'm making, and that's okay if other people don't like it. Then I think you really start to express yourself more freely through your art, and then it just naturally improves because you're doing that.
Yeah. And just to caveat that's the journey of an artist. So you don't come out that, you do deal with that imposter syndrome, and is somebody going to like it? Is it worthy of selling? Am I good enough? But those are questions you have to keep looking at and keep going. And then once you have faced off with that and you are doing it from that place of truth, the rest, it's unfolding and you can handle it.
Yeah. And you'll know you're at that point when you're at a market and somebody comes in and they look around and they go, and then they say, my niece does really great art, and they pull it up on their phone and they start showing you their niece's art. And when you can genuinely go, oh, that's lovely, or I love what they did with that, and not feel anything not feel like rejected, you're at that place, right? Because
or they look at the price point and they say, wow, gosh, I think I can make this myself for cheaper.
Yeah.
And you're just like, people say that all the time, well, art is expensive.
No,
and
if
you really get into, and Lee and I would love to talk about this further. We talk about this all the time, sidebar. But why art is priced the way it is, because I think a lot of people want to buy art, but don't understand the value and why it is the price that it is.
Yeah.
And that's not something you would know unless you're on the other end of making it. But so they question that. It's like, okay, well, you can't sit on it, you can't eat it, you can't rent it out. Well, maybe you can rent it out. So it's a romance sale. It's a different type of purchase. So the value has to be understood. I mean, I think once you have a piece of original art in your house, it's highly addictive.
Yes.
I'm like, I want to buy all of my favorite artists and turn my house into a gallery, because it's the best feeling ever. That energy that is emitted. But anyway, so yes, I have heard that.
Oh, sorry. I was just surprised. I'm like, even if you don't like it, I don't think I could do it.
Or even said about other artists, like you'll hear someone walk by and like, it's just so expensive. Like that's just a piece of paint flung at the canvas, like but understanding how that piece of paint got there, and the techniques and learning the supplies and the colors, and and everyone's also entitled to that. Art can be valuable to you or not, so that's okay.
And there's that famous story attributed to Picasso where a woman sees him in a restaurant and asks him to do a little sketch, and he does a quick little sketch. And she said, how much? And he quotes a high price, and she goes, that took you 5 minutes. And he's like, no, ma'am, it took me 20 years.
No, I see. I think he said 5 minutes and 50 years.
50 years.
Or something.
Yeah. But it was like a huge...
and that encapsulates it perfectly.
Yes. It's all the time I spent learning, all the notebooks full of terrible art, all of that is in each new piece that you make.
And also the techniques of the supplies, working with the supplies. That is the hardest and most fun part, is learning how to do what you want to do with the supplies.
Yeah.
I'm surprised nobody would say that to a chef. It's like, well, that took you 5 minutes to make that dish.
Well, listen,
like,
Lee and Kelly are much nicer to me. If someone showed me the picture of the niece's paint, I would be like, this is terrible. What are you talking about?
But at some point you become an encourager of all artists, because we are all on that journey together.
Wonderfully stated. Well, thank you both again so much for coming on and sharing your art and your inspirations and your stories.
Yes, it's been great
for having us.
Yes, good luck on the shows.
Thank you.
And thank you to Nick for being my wingman today. I'm happy to have you here. You will share your knowledge.
Well, it was also important. I wanted to be here because both my neighbors.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
It's like I set this up. Gosh darn it, I'm going to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as always, thank you to our wonderful sponsors, Emergent Financial Services, Craddock Serious Insurance, Matthias Young Realty, Charlottesville Opera, and Forward Adelante. Big thank you for Judah behind the camera for making us all look good. Thank you to Jerry and the I Love Studios for having us. Next week, we're going to have David McCormick, I believe, from Early Music America.
Yep.
On the show, so that should be great. We look forward to seeing everyone till then. But, we look forward to seeing everyone next week. But until then, hasta mañana.